It's Friday, July 12th, 2019. We are continuing our fiscal year 20 budget deliberations. This is a special meeting. Welcome, everybody. Attending are Commissioners Duncan, Brooks, and Filios. We have a sellout crowd this morning. Do we have any changes to the agenda? I don't hear of any, so we'll proceed. And we have a number of business items. It is my hope that we will achieve balance before the end of the day today. So let's see if we can do that, in fact. So the first item, and some of these are in fact action items, is deliberations and decisions regarding funding for medical insurance. But I think we were going to shift to the wage first, Dina, is that right? But anyway, I'll turn it over to Dina Darrow. Go right ahead.
All right, thank you. Welcome, everyone. I feel like I'm at a Hollywood premiere. This is exciting. Who knew budgeting could be so interesting? So today we're going to start with talking about the wage study. We have our friends from HR here to give us an update. We were hoping to have final numbers today to plug into the budget, but we're thinking it's going to be more like Monday or Tuesday. So we won't finish, but we can get real close today. So we've gone ahead and canceled the afternoon meeting to give you the afternoon off. We're going to try to get as much done as we can today, and then come back Monday afternoon with more solid numbers, and we can just finish up at that point if we can. So I'll give you a quick look at where we are on our preliminary summary. And I've done a couple of quick calculations. I still need to run the Alliant numbers through, but I went ahead and plugged them in as of this morning from Alliant. So right now your total deficit is 3.2. That does include everything that's up here on the board on the sticky notes. Everything on the sticky notes contributes to this deficit. I also went ahead and took our number right now, our tentative number that we have for the wage study.
Good move.
And I went ahead and did a calculation on the side as implementation as of January 1st, so 3/4 of a year. That would come out here, bringing your deficit down to about 2.6 if we implement 9 months. So that's where we are right now. And I will go ahead and hand it off to Sylvia to talk about the wage study.
Dina, can I just ask one question? Are cars in there at all?
Yes,
Cars,
it's this is everything.
Okay.
Should be
Right.
$700,000
For cars.
placeholder, right, Dean?
Okay, yes,
$700,000
everything that's up there,
placeholder.
including the
Okay.
$700,000 placeholder, all of that up there is in.
Thank you.
You bet.
Okay, Sylvia?
Okay, Sylvia Proud, Human Resources Director. So since the June 19th elected officials meeting, we've continued, the compensation team has continued to work on the plan based on the scenarios that were, where there was general consensus by the Board of County Commissioners to move forward with. And that scenario was utilizing a minimum 2% increase, and implementation option 1, looking at doing that fully funded 100% in fiscal year 20. And in that study, we were using compensation policy 120 for the pay plans related to it, updating the sworn officer matrix, and projecting a bonus type situation for staff that were above maximum. And so the number that Dina is showing represents that. So our next steps are, we've done a lot of work in the meantime. We've continued to work on the schedule and analyze the data that we had along with other criteria to place positions into the grades. And so our next step is to meet with the elected officials, and those start next week, and have discussion with each of the offices so that they are very familiar with the plan and we're able to answer any of their questions. And then from there we should have any additional changes that might be needed and be able to work on those final numbers for Dina and the budget.
Okay.
Thank you.
Questions for Sylvia? Yeah, go right
Not really
ahead.
for Sylvia, but is there any way to focus that?
It's a little out of focus.
It is out of focus.
Nervous are gone.
Well,
You're right. When you're right, you're right.
I just looked at
Make
the
it
screen.
bigger.
Sylvia, Did you want to touch on any elements of the plan that are being contemplated? Or is it premature?
I think it's premature, unless that's something that the board is like to discuss, sure.
No, not for me. I mean, it's a work in progress,
Absolutely.
and works in progress are sometimes upsetting until you see the final result, so I would rather wait.
Leslie? Go ahead, Nancy.
It would be nice to have the board's direction on how to handle the employees over maximum, so we can figure that into the calculations.
Okay, so what's the recommendation?
The initial recommendation back in June, which of course is up for discussion, was a 2% adjustment for those over max, but I believe there's been other scenarios discussed, so we don't have them figured yet.
So I kind of proposed a $500 bonus for each employee who's over
Max?
max.
Your turn.
I don't, that doesn't seem like enough to me. I mean, a $500 bonus, most people will, when it's done with taxes and whatnot, they might go and have a nice dinner on that, so.
I don't know where you eat.
I know where I pay tax.
Nancy, go ahead.
To add, if this helps the discussion at all, once Sylvia moved people to the ranges they were supposed to be in, and all of that took place, there are only 3 people in the general pay plan that are over maximum. So
It's not a big killer.
it's not.
So I guess I would just want to see the numbers then.
Okay. And I'm fine with 2%, because again, there'll be a final adjustment that'll be made sometime next week. So if we have to lower it, we can lower it. But for now, I think for your purposes, so that you can move forward. There are people here, we have some guests, I think they're here to hear some information or some detail on the plan. But I don't want to drive you too far, because I don't want to miss that expectation. So can you or Nancy comment at least on the sworn or on the sheriffs in general? Is there anything that you can say about that?
Sure, I believe we could. So we've been meeting with the sheriff's office at the direction of the Board of County Commissioners. And sorry. Tune it
Do
up.
you want to stand up? Would it be easier?
It
would be easier to hear.
Okay, Dan.
Yeah, I'll be good.
I'm supposed to be in front.
You have good stage presence, come on.
We have been meeting with the sheriff's office regarding the sworn matrix. And the board had directed Nancy and I to look at the sworn matrix based on Coeur d'Alene law enforcement wages. So that's what we have built their sworn matrix following the Coeur d'Alene wages, and then their schedule is as set. They have a 9-year, 7-year, 9-year, a couple, like 1 or 2 5-year type of plans. So we didn't adjust how that dynamic occurred. We did adjust in the current pay plan, their positions, some of their positions receive increases every other year. We just spread out that increase every year because there really is no cost savings to every other year. And in all fairness to those staff that had that type of proposal, we thought it would be better to spread that out. After yesterday's meeting, I believe we all concurred it looked like a good plan to move forward with. The cost estimates are still being done with that proposal in place. And Nancy, anything you want to add?
Can you comment, at least in broad terms, for the sworn and patrol deputies in particular, regarding starting and midpoint and end? You don't have to use specific figures, but just on a relative basis.
So the starting on Coeur d'Alene wages was about, for a police officer that has to go through the academy, so 23 something an hour, and then after they receive their basic certification, they go to 24 and some odd cents an hour, and the max on the schedule is $35.80 for the just the police officers.
Okay. And where, as we're contemplating currently, where do we fall in?
Right now, our wages were quite a bit lower.
No, I don't mean current, I mean
Current?
proposed.
That's what we did with the proposed, is align them with the Coeur d'Alene.
Okay, so you're saying that on a starting basis, we are matching Coeur d'Alene PD?
Yes.
Give me the 5th year, roughly.
5th year, and based on our meetings, we agreed that 5th year intermediate would be considered their market, and that is $28.86 an hour. And in Coeur d'Alene, they max out at their 5th year at about 35, close to $35.80 an hour.
Right. What happens thereafter?
Thereafter, they continue to get their increases, a little bit slower in pace, but their max is at year 9, master level, $35.80 here. So they haven't, our police officers will have a 9-year schedule. Coeur d'Alene has a 5-year schedule.
Okay.
And we couldn't afford a 5-year schedule.
Right. Nancy?
Just to add to what Sylvia said, we did make a higher increase at year 5 for the patrol officers to bring them up a little bit higher. That's when we lose our staff, so we did increase the raises at year 5.
Okay, so the thinking, and for everybody's digestion, if you will, is that we wanted to be competitive up front, because the real hassle, one of the biggest challenges is not only retention, but it's in hiring. When you look at the numbers and you see how few people actually get through not just the physical and the mental, but the rigorous background checks, it's pathetically poor. So if we're going to attract a more qualified candidate, we have to be more competitive. And at the same time, we realize that we've got this 4 to 6 year time frame where they're really seasoned and where we're most vulnerable and where we tend to lose them, and that's where we tried to beef it up as well. So before I go any further, Dan, would you care to comment?
Yes, sir. First of all, on behalf of the sheriff and myself, we thank the board. I mean, I think it isn't perfect, but I think everybody's trying their best to do the best they can with the money they got to make it right. And I think we made a whole lot of progress yesterday relative to the peace officers, the patrol officers matrix. Again, I do think it's important to look very, very significantly at that 5-year mark. And the reason for that is, and again, I'm just going off of memory, but I know Coeur d'Alene's they're topping out there at $35.78, and we're probably $5 or $6 or maybe more off, even with the new plan at that mark. By the same token, we're giving some pretty good raises to people, and we're appreciative of that, and we just look forward to working with the board to bring this to a conclusion. I think we're headed in the right direction, and everybody's working together.
Okay, cool.
Hey, can I just say one thing?
Go right ahead, please.
On the washout rate on the backgrounds, we are actually doing just a little bit better than national average. So we get about 1%, 1.5% of our people make it through the process completely. And that's very consistent with national. So we're not harsher than anybody else, and we're certainly not softer than anybody else. But that's very consistent.
And your point, Ben, is well taken. I don't think it's a question that we're too rigorous. I'd almost rather have us too rigorous than less.
I would too. It reduces our liability
Yeah,
a lot.
I think it speaks more to to the problems in our society, and let's just leave it at that.
Well, it's just that the pool of athletes is more like a shallow puddle.
Right. Yes, Dan, please.
I just wanted to publicly compliment Sylvia. She had to put up with me, which isn't, and it wasn't at my finest hour, but you know, you did a good job hiring the right person, because she's got a good handle on this, and I don't think if she had approached it the way she did, I don't know that we would have got to where we're at. So I really appreciate everything that she did, and we'll just move forward.
Okay.
Thank you.
Quick note on detention.
Yes, so on detention, when we did the BDPA survey, gave us their data, and we looked at where we were in line with market. We are at market, so their matrix stayed the same. There's no bump in their matrix at all, and the sheriff's office is aware of that.
Okay. Yes, Dan.
I was going to stay away from that part, but now that we asked the question, we want to advocate for detention. We realize that the money's finite, We realize that the board is doing what they can do to move this whole thing along. And I guess in the context of where we're at right now, I would say that it would be very helpful if we start looking right away at trying to adjust that detention matrix perhaps next year. I realize money's finite this year, but again, we look forward to working with you guys and doing the best we can.
Go right ahead, Sylvia.
And so in that, if the sheriff's office has individuals that are at their max, we would want to calculate that 2% bonus for them as well, but we don't know all that information yet, so that will be
Until
figured
Nancy's- okay.
out for us.
Any comments on the general pay plan now, outside of KCSO?
The general pay plan, you know, we found some positions way under market, some right at market, and some a little bit over market. And so in our whole analysis, we aren't taking money away from anyone, but we are adjusting the pay plan to reflect the market, which we use the survey average from BDPA as one of our starting points to create this updated plan. So we will have a schedule for the elected officials each to review for overall and for your specific areas starting next week. We had positions, I mean, our planners were extremely out of market, and so were the attorneys. So those are the couple of positions that stood out. Can you think of any other ones, Dorothy? That stood out as really having some market disparities. And we can see that in our recruitment process, that we're having a hard time finding attorneys and planners and some of our other positions overall. So we're trying to make those adjustments fairly and equitably, and really just bring a good plan to the board to implement.
I have a question. Pardon me. This study that's been done, I know there have been studies down here before, and it's my understanding that every time a study gets done, by the time it's finished, it gets picked to shreds, and then it's not implemented, and we're back to square one of handing out money, trying to do the right thing, but with no, kind of willy-nilly. And I think it's real important that people understand this is going to be what we all agreed to in the beginning, what we agreed to during the process, I mean, the methodology, and now we have to agree to the results. Not to say that it's perfect. It may need a little adjustment, but don't destroy where we're at. We've all worked very hard to get here. Everybody's given a little and eaten a little on this one. Everybody.
Thank you, that's a
Thank
perfect comment.
thank you, employees and the board members.
Yes.
So
Leslie, go ahead.
I do have some comments. I still don't believe that we can implement the wage study in 1 year. What I want to know, I've heard that this board will not take foregone taxes this year, but what I want to hear from Bill and Chris is, will you take foregone taxes next year? Because already we are $2.3 million into the 2021 overage. So we had 2.7 million in new growth and 3% taxes available to us this year. If we keep that number, which I don't think it'll be as much because I don't believe we're going to see that kind of growth for 2019, but if we keep that number, 2.7 million, that we would have if we took the 3% plus new growth, looking at historic healthcare, which would be another 900,000, implementing the full wage study, which would be another 500,000, and that's what's still up for debate, so we don't even know if that's the right number. 700,000 for cars. That's 2.1 million. We know 200,000 is coming for community development software. That's 2.3 million out of 2.7 million already for 2021, not taking into account anything else that's going to happen in the meantime.
So are you saying
So-
that you would take foregone next year?
Nope, that's not what I'm saying at all.
Well,
I'm
that's what I
saying
wanna hear. I
that,
mean, you're asking whether we would. I want to know if you will.
no, I will not take foregone next
Okay.
year.
Okay.
No.
Same thing. I will not either.
But I have a quote: we can ignore reality, but we cannot ignore the consequences of ignoring reality. And the reality is we're hitting that ceiling. By implementing this in 1 year, we're hitting the ceiling, and We will not be able to fund ongoing costs because and Dina has the information on our fund balance numbers that are significantly being lowered. So enabled to keep that cushion, enabled in order to continue ongoing funding, that's the only funding source I see right now.
I think that's an extremely simplistic view of budgeting. We have revenues that we are not capturing, and they need to be captured. We have ways we can cut things other than people, and if we start telling people they're getting taxes are not 3%, see, the problem is the boards over the past years have not taken the 3%. It's like a house that you don't do maintenance on. And eventually, the roof's caving in, the place needs painting, the driveway needs fixing. This is that year. And we need to be strong enough to take I can look anybody in the face in Kootenai County and say, we're taking the full 3%. And I voted for that from the beginning. But I also voted for, we're not gonna come back and claw back more money from you. People can't afford it. We just went through BOE. We didn't see many, but I've had calls from people who they're getting down to the point of, I'm having to leave my house if this goes any further in terms of property taxes. And I won't go there. I will not go there. We'll find other ways, but I will not go there. And layoffs are not in the cards. We're not bouncing the budget on the backs of the employees or the people of Kootenai County's previous, where the board hasn't done what they should do. I'm very sorry that they did. Now the bill comes due. And this is going to be a tough year. So be a good politician, if you will, be a good employee, and stand up for it, and let's get it done. And next year, we will find a way. We will find a way. We've already been told by a number of people that we won't find a way this year without foregone taxes. You know what? That's not true. We're close.
So it's my turn? Okay.
Go ahead.
Not only do we not need to take foregone this year, we won't need to take foregone next year. Before this day is over, I think you're going to see how we can come close to balancing this budget, realizing that there have been years of, and unfortunately this is an unpopular statement, of under-taxation, but at the same time there have been years of under-forecasting revenue, and we're doing it again this year. So what I hope to demonstrate before this day is over is that there is revenue that is anticipated, that has been proven is coming in over time, and that we can implement the wage study in 1 year with a delayed implementation in January. I have worked budgets larger than this. I have confidence in what we're doing here. We don't need foregone this year. We will not need foregone next year. So let's move on. Dina, I'm turning it over to you.
Okay,
So you have my answer.
all right. So what you're looking at right now on the screen is just a trend. These were taken from our quarterly reports. So this is our assigned fund balance. This is what was put into the budget. If it wasn't spent in 1 year, it was rolled forward into the next. That's why you're not seeing the change, a very big change. The unassigned, that's our cushion that we use. This number is probably lower now. It's constantly in motion. So these numbers were as of reporting dates. They're not current to date, but they're as of those fiscal years. So this one is as of Q2. So this is where we are right now in assigned fund balance that we have available for capital projects, long-term planning, all of that stuff. The rest of this has already been put into the budget to pay for stuff. So that's where we are with fund balance. Commissioner Duncan asked for just a quick estimate this morning, so that's what I threw together for that, just to give you an idea of where you're at. So back to here, I'm going to go back to our agenda. So we've talked about the wage study. So let's talk about health insurance. So last night, our
By the way,
friend,
go
ahead.
I think you're going there. So you
Yeah.
heard from Scott?
we heard from
Oh,
Scott.
okay, good.
So I will bring up what he sent us this morning. So this is option 3B that the board was entertaining with the change to spouses. So I plugged in the savings. Now, again, this is estimated, I have to run everything through the system. But that savings is reflected here.
Okay,
So that's what our new costs would be based on the estimates from Alliant. So that went down about $400,000, reducing your overall deficit. So I'll put this back on the screen just so everybody can see it.
On that one, we had asked him, everything up there is dollars, until we get down to dental,
Right?
and then it's percent. And we had asked him for a
Right.
dollar number
Yeah.
there. Did he
Yep.
provide that?
He did provide that. Let me see if I saved this out here. If not, I got it through an email. Oh, please. Everybody take a sip off their coffee. All right. I believe this is medical claims by year, or employee, spouse, and child. And this was to illustrate over the last 3 years where our cost drivers are as far as the claims. So we can see, you know, we're going up quite a bit. The spouses are the ones that are driving the cost. And the second slide shows the dental. I can make this bigger.
there you go.
Good.
So there's your dental.
Okay.
Okay, so employee and spouse goes from 20 to 33, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's if it's in
Okay.
the records.
That's not,
That's
Ross,
not
for the
correct.
record, what
Yes.
he's doing is giving you several options.
right.
So you can go from 5
Current.
and splits evenly, or you can go just using the employee. You can go from 5 to 10 and then do an even increase that way, or you can double it, share mostly with family. So you have options of how you want to go when going from the way we currently do to 50% spread.
A schmear.
But the figures that you've plugged in were from,
That's,
Go ahead.
that is the 50% covered by employee, from
Okay.
30 to 50% covered by employee.
okay, so that's the 20 to the 33 with spouse?
Well, either way that you do it, it's gonna be the same amount.
Oh, it's gonna be the same amount?
Yeah.
So it's just a
Yes.
question of how we carve it up.
Yes.
Right,
All right.
right. It's how you spread it to the tiers. So you could pick which way you wanted to spread it to the tiers.
Any thoughts?
But they're not huge numbers.
I mean, if we don't start making decisions, we're gonna be piling everything up to next week, so.
No, but this is more on the back end. I mean, the front end, we have the savings, so
Right.
this is not something we have to do this second, but,
Right. I can send this to the board, and you guys
Yeah.
can maybe on Monday just identify which one you prefer.
okay,
That's fine.
Okay?
perfect,
Very nice.
thank you.
Thank you, Dina. Good job.
All right. So I'll put this back up just so everyone can kind of see, because this is what'll go back to the employees. Am I okay to share this with the budget groups so that they can communicate to the employees that this is what we're looking at for the spread for
Yeah,
the
I'm fine.
employees?
Yeah.
I'm fine.
Okay, great.
Subject to change, but yeah.
Yeah, but this is what we're going with. Okay, terrific. Great. How's everybody doing? Feeling good, feeling strong? Moving right on through? Boom. And now we've arrived at the sticky note review. Who wants to do sticky notes?
Well, before we do that, because we can always do cuts,
Sure.
what I want to do is take a look at unanticipated non-property tax revenue.
Okay,
And so what I did is I asked him to take a look at this for us.
Okay.
And over a time span of the last 3 or 4 years. So we can see what kind of revenue comes in over the course of the year that we typically don't anticipate.
Okay.
So, are you okay, Kim? Are you ready?
Yeah, I can present the information that we discussed, definitely. So I don't have a computer, but I'll share. I brought 20 thinking that would be enough.
Yeah, Bill and I can share one. And
They're
then
pretty small.
let folks share some.
These, here. And then
Very
she
good.
has some- pass that back to Dina so she can.
You can share.
And then I'll let you all pass these. So while these are being passed around, I'll just go through how I got to these numbers. So just going through the columns across there, I pulled prior year actuals for FY17 and 18 for the entire county. I did not pull grant funds, and I didn't pull solid waste. I then pulled FY19.
Yeah, just hold on a second, Kim, so that everybody can. Are we all set out there? Okay, go ahead.
Then the next two columns are the FY19 amended budget and actual amount to date. The FY20 columns were, the auditor review is what was presented from the department to auditor. BOCC deliberations is where we are at currently. I looked at this again this morning to be sure that these numbers were still what is in the financial system. And then the next column was our current direction, that BOCC deliberations column, less what we actually brought in FY18. So that number there sums to the $1.478 million. Then I looked at our current actual amount. Well, actually, let me say, the reason these are the only accounts that are on here, I pulled anything where the discrepancy in the current direction less what we brought in FY18 was over $50,000. Then I looked at just those accounts and dug in. Some of those, there were some anomalies in FY18, so I didn't even go any further with those accounts. So these are the only accounts that shook out at being at least a $50,000 variance. And all of them fall into the general accounts, either general fund or justice fund general accounts, with the exception of one line item within the sheriff budget. I did discuss that line item with the undersheriff yesterday before I brought it forward to you today, and he agrees that we can up this amount. So then the projected totals, all of these come in either monthly, quarterly, so they're regular amounts that come in. Shares of revenue from the state are apportioned to the counties. So I projected out, for example, on the state revenue sharing, we've received 2 of 4 for this year. So I just doubled that amount. Same thing on the sales tax. The liquor amount, there is a legislative decrease that went in. It's a small variance. So that's something we might want to look at a little bit closer. But again, this was just what we brought in today, projected out for the rest of the year. And then the same thing for the sheriff fees. These have been posted through May, so we have, the remainder of the year monthly that would go out. So just using this with a projected number, not a projected increase, but if we were to budget the actual amount we're projected to receive in FY19, that number sums to $1.62 million. We could even go further. The little percentage marks in the blue show the year-over-year increase from 17 to 18. We could even go further and project a slight increase due to the population and everything still growing in Kootenai County. That would be even more aggressive on the revenue side. So this would be projecting what we anticipate actually receiving in FY19. You could take it a little bit further. This is, again, just information for you to review and make your own decisions.
Dan, you had a question?
I just want to make sure that the sheriff.
He's
he was
here.
out of
Ben's
town
here.
yesterday. Yeah, he's out there, but I want to make sure that Ben saw this. I mean, I was,
I did, I saw it.
and you're good with it, boss?
Yeah,
I'm appointed. so-
I am. Yeah, I trust the numbers, people do the numbers, you know, that's not my forte 100%. But, we know that our civil functions are not going down, and we just adjusted those fees with the help of the auditor's office, and I don't see us decreasing the fees in civil anytime in the near future at all. And in fact, we may have to probably reassess, we want to look at those probably every 2 or 3 years, reassess those fees and adjust them appropriately so they're paying the actual expenses.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions?
There's one other comment I'd like to make is, if you look, I looked at the actual amended budget on all of these line items, and most of them have not been increased since FY18. And so I think it's safe to budget a higher number there, in my opinion.
Which you haven't done yet.
Excuse me,
You haven't done that yet?
it's not my,
That's what
It's
I'm
not,
saying.
it's
right,
not.
I don't see the current
You didn't do any
direction.
projections.
This is just a projection
Okay.
off of what we have currently to date
To date.
in the system,
Okay.
and this is where the current direction for budget is in the financial system, which is the information that I have available to
Thank
me
you.
to look
Thank you
at.
very much.
So do you consider the 1.625 million conservative?
I consider it safe. It's a current year. I mean, we're already 75% through the year, so I would consider it safe to go with that number.
Any other thoughts?
I mean, it's definitely up to, everyone to take a look at them. This is the first chance, I think, that some people have had to look at this.
Right. Has the
Let's-
auditor seen this?
No.
I presented this information to Chairman Filios in June, and it's my understanding that this was shared at that time. And the numbers were a little bit different because it was
Right,
June.
right.
But that these were areas of opportunity. When I worked in the auditor's office, these were accounts that, you would want to look at because they are coming from the state and they are on an upward trend.
Okay, so basically what happened, to Kim's point, yes, she did share this, I brought it up briefly in June, not to the detail that you're seeing here, but I think the point that has to be made is there's history here. This isn't something that we're forecasting for the first time. So from my perspective, I have no problem bringing that 2.6 down to 1 million. Here it is. These are facts. Thoughts? Bill?
Well, I
let's-
took this and just looked at it, Chris, just if you wanted to increase it, just very conservatively, average per was 7%. So we have one at 9, one at 13, one at 6, and one at 10. So if you just did a 7% average increase, which would still be conservative, that throws another $114,000 into that number.
I don't know that you can do the percentages that way because one of them is 10%, but it's only 392,000. And the highest is 5 million, which is 9,000, so that's
I
probably,
just took the average.
Sure,
Yeah, no, I
sure.
think to use Kim's point, stay safe. And I would go with the 1.6. Does the board, is there an appetite to take the deficit down by 1.6?
I think it's safe.
I would want to have the auditor just review and double check and get back with me. That would
Okay.
be my thing.
Well, I'm for taking it down, but by all means, perform the check. Okay, just so that you can verify. So I'm going to operate for now until shown otherwise that our deficit is now down to 1 million. Or 2.575 minus the 1.6. It's actually, what, 900? Okay, now I'm going to turn to Nancy. You mentioned some 400,000 plus yesterday. Help me out. Did it have to do with the sheriff?
Yes.
Go right ahead.
If the sheriff agreed to freeze some positions that had been open for quite some time, it would save us $484,000.
So
Dan?
let me speak to that. We met this morning, our staff, and we discussed the printout that Dina sent us yesterday on the open position report. So I'll turn it over to Kim, and she can kind of run this down and give you where we sit with that.
Which kind of takes us into item 2, right? Because that was going to deal somewhat with personnel.
Yep, that's,
I'm trying to go where we can go safely before we get into cuts. I imagine we will be getting into cuts, but then maybe this is one, but go ahead. Kim?
I'm just wanting to make sure that we all understand as we look at those and consider the positions that we could possibly freeze in the future. That we consider, like on the patrol side, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 listed there as open. Currently in our backgrounds, we have 10, and we're continually testing, constantly testing, so that number is always being pushed into there. But we have 10 people in background, so there is potential for us to fill those positions along the way. Given the averages that we are a little bit above nationally, putting people in, per 100, we're usually getting a pretty good turnaround for how many are approved. There is potential that we could maybe lean on that somewhere downstream, but when we spoke this morning, we talked about the consideration we might be able to make there, which I'll let the undersheriff speak to. The other positions, however, we're getting very close and have people in the background process for all of those that are listed otherwise. But I think patrol being our biggest chunk of positions there that are open right now is probably the one we really need to consider. The other thing is that those positions, even though they're shown how many days they're open, we try to submit those in to fill the one that has been open the longest first, but it doesn't work that way in the HR world, I suppose. But if you were to take all of the people that we've hired along the way and fill the positions that have actually been open the longest, it doesn't look as bad as it does for those positions that are, showing 973 days without being filled. What we're doing right now is HR's taking the number and filling the most current, recently vacated position, and it isn't an accurate picture of who we're hiring and getting.
So what can we do?
Is what I'm told.
so Chris and Ben, I'll speak on it. I want to be clear in saying that we're trying to work with the board to get this number down. When we sat and talked this morning, we felt based on where people are in background and otherwise, we could very easily say freeze 2 positions, which is 150 grand.
Okay.
We can say that with a degree of safety. Now, if there's room to discuss this later on, because we can't cover all this in this meeting, I'm sure we're more than willing to sit down and talk about it, but we're offering up 2 right now.
Let's
Is
go.
that right, Ben? Okay.
Let's go with that for now.
And otherwise, I could answer to how many other positions that are currently on that open position report that we have in backgrounds. But I think by giving up those 2, it just kind of voids the rest of that
Okay,
conversation right now.
That's thank you, we appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Dina, do you want to get us back on track? Maybe we are on track.
I am gonna add that to your balancing right now. Drum roll.
So we're down to just under 800,000.
Y'all are killing it. Good job.
Either that or we get you.
All
And
right,
we can verify the numbers.
okay. So, do we want to talk about community support?
Yeah, let's go there.
Okay, let me pull that schedule up. Trying to stay organized here. All right. So over here in this schedule, I got a lot of notes, so forgive my kind of craziness here. So, what you're seeing right now is the original schedule with some of the open questions we had. I also copied in Sean's homework assignment, but he responded back that we're not really held to any specific amount to give to U of I Extension. U of I Extension sent us an 11th hour schedule showing their detailed budget. saying that they really, really, really need this amount here, but we are not contractually obligated to give this amount, nor this amount, nor any amount, really. So that was one of the open ones, and some of these other ones in red were ones that we were talking about coming back to. So we have Jobs Plus right now is at 50. Heritage Health is at 65. And then we have these two that were possible increases, and then we had U of I extension. So I will give it back to the board to discuss how they would like to address each of these. And I did pencil in a number. If we were to cut what we currently have for U of I extension by 50%, that's what we would give them. But we can adjust that however you want or leave it.
So I can speak to Heritage Health. With new Medicaid expansion, they are thinking that it's a possibility that more of their clients are going to be covered. And so taking that down to 50,000 would mean for them 600 visits. It's not necessarily 600 people, it's just 600 visits, starting January, that they may be able to figure out the Medicaid expansion details, so.
I'm good with that.
Bill, you good with 50K?
Yes, that sounds equitable.
All right.
And so, Bill, did you have a chance to look at the Jobs Plus or Economic Development?
I did, and it looks to me like we're seeing some positive movement there. I still have a hard time with it, but I'd like to reserve a decision until we get through with everything else.
Okay. So, meeting Monday, well, that still applies, so I'll just make that green. Terrific. All right, so North Idaho Crisis Center and Safe Passage, I have a note here, possible increases. Would you like to modify either of these?
For North Idaho, I would take it back up to 10.
Now, which one is it?
Yeah.
North Idaho Crisis
North Idaho
Center.
Crisis
Yeah, there's
Centers.
some things that are not huge amounts, but important amounts.
It's important because our officers
It's a potential savings.
are able to use that as a resource for people
Yeah.
that they contact in the
Yeah.
community instead of taking them to jail.
Yeah.
So
And
I agree with
It's a
10,000.
potential savings. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And I appreciate that, because I think in the long run, it'll actually save us time and money.
Yes.
So I do appreciate that very much.
Yeah. The reason why I would increase safe passage is because there was a law, or I guess it was Barry can speak to this, a judge's Supreme Court ruling that is now going to kind of tie officers' hands on arresting during domestic violence incidents. So I would see a potential increase in safe passages clients. And so I would be probably willing to double that to 3,000.
I'm good.
I'm seeing nods.
Yep.
Okay.
For me, yeah.
Barry?
Thank you. As a board
Yeah,
member.
just as a tag to that, the reality is that in certain circumstances, the officers are not going to be able to arrest except for a felony offense. So that may lead to a circumstance where a safe passage needs to house somebody even temporarily that's going to drive up their costs. And really, it's making sure that safety is
A lot of taxes
in
are
safe
up too,
circumstances.
actually.
Okay,
We're already seeing it, so thank you very much.
okay. U of I extension.
Extension.
I don't have a problem rolling it back to the 147, but I think their popularity is second only to the fair. And you have enormously popular programs like the Master Gardener at 4-H. I think and the increase, by the way, that was proposed by Shara was to cover, I think, the fringe benefits, health insurance. And I don't have, excuse me?
Salaries as well.
Salaries as well. I don't have a problem rolling it back to the 147.5, but I don't think
It's actually 153.
oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
147.5 was last year.
No, I'm saying take it back to last year's, to the 147.5. I don't think I'd want to cut beyond that. And we still have those other capital items there. Shara, go right ahead.
So if I may, part of what we're dealing with our budget is much the same as you guys are dealing with in trying to meet market values and dealing with that fringe change. Because the salaries of our staff were put into university by predecessors, that's not something that we actually have a whole lot of control over, but for our MOU, these funds still cover those needs. So I appreciate you at least trying to hold us to last year. I understand, having sat through the beginning, and really appreciate how much you've cut down and where your deficit is. I will do my best with what I've got, but yeah, we're looking at a 12,000 increase from last year just on salaries and fringe.
So are we okay then holding it at the 147.5? We still have items up here.
Yeah.
It's okay until we get down. I mean, to me, I'm going with the items on the board and the items up here. You just kind of, you're going to have to drive this down just a little more.
We are.
And I do want to state, just because we've found money, we're still putting an increase to the taxpayers. So if there are things that should be cut, they need to be cut, not just because we've found funding, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't think anybody suggested otherwise.
No, I'm just stating it.
Okay.
Dina, where do we go?
Let's adjust to what we just did. There's your new deficit. All right, there's the number to beat, 788,373. Would anyone like a break? We've been at this an hour.
Do you want to keep going?
If we don't go another hour, I'll be.
No, we won't go another. Okay. Okay. Let's go for about another 30 minutes. If we need to break, we can break then. How's that? So we'll go to 10:20.
Solution, everybody here resign and we hit it.
He's saying we've got 800,000 in the room.
Right.
Okay.
Okay,
Any thoughts? Go right ahead, Dina.
so if we go to the sticky notes, we have $2.3 million sitting up there. So if you cut 788 out of that, you're done.
So there's a couple of them that I put my initial and an X by.
Go ahead.
Anything cursive is what I want to keep, but my initial plus an X, I think is appropriate to leave. And with the wage study, I would like to cut both on-call pays for detectives and coroner. My reasoning behind it is they're both hourly employees, so or all of them, and they're gonna get overtime for any time they're called out. So having extra on-call pay, I'm not in favor of.
All right.
Which one is that and how much? I don't have good
So
eyes.
one is 15,000, one is 10,000, so that's 25,000 right there.
Okay, so where are those?
They're purple,
The
2
purple
and
ones?
3.
Okay.
Yep.
So, Under Sheriff, I'm gonna have you help me by being Vanna White. Can you hand me the on-call coroner and the on-call
Okay,
detective?
hold on. Yeah,
I
Larry.
haven't heard a consensus that my call should be cut.
Yeah, hold on a
This is Warren
second there.
Keene from the coroner's office, and I would like to speak
Nobody's-
to that issue.
Nobody's
No, we're
cutting
not.
it.
Go right ahead. Go right ahead.
Call is a very important thing for people because we interrupt their life. They can't have a family party, they can't have a drink after work. And so the minuscule amount of pay, $250 a week for them to be available 24/7 for 7 days is a minimal amount. And in my job, I'm also trying to decrease liability for the county. There are individuals in the county that are paid per call that are of one gender, and 2/3 of my deputies are of a different gender. And if we're gonna have equal pay for equal work, my deputies need to be paid $250 a week for call.
So I have two things to say to that. One, the people that I think you're referring to on call are exempt, they don't get overtime, and they actually have to be available to, it's just a little bit more complicated. They have to be available for search warrants, for other court appearances, last minute. And the second thing is, when your deputies hire on, are they told that they will have on-call shifts? Are they aware of that when they accept the job?
It's not mandatory, no.
So they can say, we're not gonna be on call,
Yep.
okay?
And then that, of course, increases the overtime for the sheriff's office because they can obviously remove deceased persons from the scene until I allow it. And my people do not get overtime. They do not get comp time. They are under the 29 hours a week, and so they are not eligible for that. So they're on the scene for 13 hours last weekend on 2 different scenes. That means I only get that person in the office for 12 hours the next week.
Do you have an overtime budget?
No, my people don't get overtime. They don't get comp time. They're part-time deputies.
Yeah, they're part-time,
Okay.
so until they reached 40 hours a week, they wouldn't get overtime.
Thoughts?
Bill?
No, on this, we've cut the bejeevers out of the coroner's request for a lab and this and that and the other. I'm not inclined to cut this at all.
I'm gonna put these two in abeyance because I don't wanna go after 10 and 20. I wanna see 200, 300, let's go. If you don't do it, we're going to do it, or at least I'm gonna propose it and someone's gonna be unhappy. Because dealing with $5,000 and $10,000, yeah, they add up, but how many does it take to get up to 700,000? So what I'd like to see is something, and again, I may decide to go with Leslie on this, but I'm just saying that I want to go look. I want to look at some of the bigger items.
Okay, so some of the bigger items you're gonna be looking at is permanent costs, new employees, new positions. So those are in the orange in the center, and I'm just gonna read them off to you. The IT, I think this is the crossover for the
Yes.
person who's leaving, that's
Yes.
23,000, not real big. Jail record specialist, 55,502. Election temps, that's for a presidential election, that's 5,000. The district court attempts to continue the scanning process, 7-year project, that's 147,490.
Mark that.
Okay,
Well, that's a mandatory, that's a mandated
Is that-
service.
My understanding is it says you will do this.
But do we do it to that sum?
Can we
of
put
money?
it-
okay, so currently we have 4 people doing this, because it's a temp sort of thing, we have to renew that every year.
So with these 4 temps, it will take 7 years to complete this. And the judges are already having issues because it's not getting done in a timely manner.
It might take 8 years. Sorry, we're in a tough year.
Well, no, okay, that's all right. Leave it for now.
Okay,
I can speak.
Yeah.
Sorry to
go
interrupt,
ahead.
but you already covered the
No,
jail
go ahead.
records
Sure.
specialist. And I'll be honest with you, the warrants clerk is a must-have for us, a jail records specialist. We can do that one. If we're looking for 55 grand, we can take that one right now.
Okay?
great.
Thank you. Appreciate
Very
it.
much.
Reasonable we are.
They just give and give.
Start calling you,
All
start calling
right.
you Vanna, right?
Yes, yeah.
You're like
So-
this. Do you ever ready battery?
So, there's a noxious weed seasonal employee,
No, you gotta do that.
16,000. DMV clerk 3, 50,000,
Which is gonna be paid for by their increase.
There you
so.
go.
right, okay. We have, for district court, we've already reduced the float clerk to half a year for next year at 29,500. And then we have a DC float clerk lead at 62,773.
Once again, these are mandated services, so I would even be willing, if we have other places to cut, to put that DC float clerk back up to
Full year?
full year.
Okay.
Because it's great if we're gonna increase their pay, but they're still getting burned out. And that's a mandatory service that our public defenders got more bodies, our prosecuting attorneys got more bodies. They're directly affected by these additional bodies.
Okay,
So-
so would you want to change that back to a full year, or do we want to leave it at half for right now?
If we're going into Monday, put it back to full and we'll just
Yeah,
see.
I'm fine with
Can you do
it.
that for just a second? This half one, right there, where you finger is up.
Next year.
I just need to write the word full on here.
Yeah.
Was that 20 at half?
Yeah.
29 and a half,
29.
Can we,
so be 40.
instant, okay.
Okay, so this one's a cut,
And-
oops, sorry.
Instead of going after more personnel, can we look at some capital items?
Absolutely. Just for the sake of completeness, the only other one I hadn't mentioned was the
Go right
AMP
ahead.
probation officer that we approved at half
We
year.
approved that, yeah.
So, and again, I mean, we're down to the nitty gritty, this is why it's so hard. So, new programs. We have, there's Agency 360 software for the sheriff for $59.97. Sheriff recruiting for $30,000. Soft code software, that's actually less now, and I've adjusted it here. I think it's down to like 130. That is gonna allow civil to collect more fees.
Go ahead.
And then the district court collections program, you implemented the fee for $12.50 already to start the partial payment process. And last week, when our accountant went over there, there was a line of people coming forward to make partial payments. So I, just as your finance director, this is a good one, it's gonna pay for itself.
Yeah,
Okay,
and you want to talk about unanticipated revenue. We haven't even
Right.
touched that.
okay,
Right.
so I'm gonna come back to something I mentioned before you all jumped on me. Well, actually, you jumped on me last week. I'm going back to contingency of 750,000. We don't need 750.
I disagree. I think we spend it every year and I want to keep it.
Right, but what happens is we go into it, so we're borrowing it and we're paying it back at the end of the year. So what I'm saying is we're playing an accounting game. We don't need 750, we can take 500 out. I'm asking for some help here. Nancy? Ken? Explain to me how that works with the contingency.
Well, the contingency is it's a budgeted amount to cover unforeseen things during the course of the year.
Right.
So you could either budget for it.
In other words, we
Say
can
you're doing
tax for it or we can
750,
take it out of
and then
fund
at the end of
balance.
the year, if you have some accounts that go over what was budgeted by the end of the year, you could use your contingency, which is already budgeted, or if you didn't have the contingency, then you would be relying on if there was unanticipated revenue to cover it, or you would be pulling from fund balance if you didn't have the contingency budgeted already. That's it's
See, I'm
gonna
for
be one
use
way
it
or
every
the
year.
other.
Go right ahead.
This year, we've already taken $70,000 out of the justice contingency to fund the new positions in the prosecutor's office. But prior to that, we haven't taken any out mid-year since 2015.
Not mid-year, but at the
Right.
end of the year.
At the end-
Yes.
At the end of the year,
At the
we
end of the
take
year.
it because we always go over in jail and in PA goes over every year. We drain that every year when we
And
apply
if we're
that.
going to spend it, it has to be in the budget.
Right.
If we know we're going to spend it.
There's another thing, last year we increased the justice contingency $250,000 because we were going over in the conflict attorneys, but we also increased their budget. So we kind of double increased last year. We increased the justice fund contingency and we increased the conflict attorney budget. So if we went back down to $250,000 in the justice fund contingency, that's what we have had prior years up until last year. And this year, we're trending about $25,000 over in conflict attorneys, and that's it. We're not trending $250,000,
So what did we budget for?
$500,000,
So you're saying we can trim potentially 250?
which is what we have done every year before last year.
Okay, so I won't go to 250. Why don't we trim 200? And it sounds reasonably safe based on history.
Okay, so in the justice fund contingency, you want to trim 200?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Prosecutor, how many, obviously you can't give me a definite number, but right now, based on what you know, how many capital cases or just murder cases alone do you anticipate for 2020? With the crimes already committed.
How many do you want? 'Cause we
No, with the crimes that have already been committed, that are already in process right now.
You know,
If we can get through the budget, we'll just clip the murders right now. We're done.
Well, I'm gonna put mine off until the second half.
So one pending, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, okay.
But where we ran into the biggest single expense last year was with Dr. Weller on the, help me out, the K-27
Yeah.
trial, and he was
Yeah.
about 250,000.
Yeah.
But that came in during the sentencing phase, as I recall.
Well, Bill did.
Bill
He
did.
was an expert in trial.
Okay.
Yes.
He was a trial expert that we used, and that, hopefully,
Right.
we won't have another capital case, which is where that really increases exponentially the costs.
So historically, where have we tracked? That's all I'm asking. Nancy?
I can't tell you at the end of the year how much of it we've used. So
But
that's
the
all.
auditor is saying that
We apply it at the end of the year. We apply contingency. It's a resolution that we do every year. So we take what we have in contingency and we apply it to the elected groups that go over. We budget for it. So
I'm
that
still
we're
flying.
still
Go ahead,
under-
Barry.
so we're still
I'm
under.
sorry.
Go ahead.
I think that the auditor can look at a trend, both for my office
Yeah.
and the public defender's office, and absent, Renfro, they could probably see fairly, reasonably consistent number of numbers, and I don't have any problem with you guys setting a budget for our experts, and we can always come back if there's something
That's
extraordinary, but a number of years ago, the commissioners went away from that to allowing us to use discretionary funds. And frankly, I think that sometimes it feels like a blank check because there's nothing to push up against in terms of how we spend our money.
I'm good with trimming the 200 and just ask the auditor to verify. Go back and look at trend, and if I'm
Okay.
underestimating, we'll fix it. We'll make it right.
Right, got it. So, 562, number to beat.
We started at 19 million over. We can't find $500,000.
We can do this. Okay, so new programs in green, capital. We have the coroner's office remodel for 60,000. We have an elections machine and remodel that goes with the elections machine for 136,465. We have 10 express votes machines for 35,180. We have 12 sheriff's radios for 78,960. And then we have the sheriff's vehicles, which is a placeholder for 700,000. We have not received a solid number for the vehicles yet, but that should cover it within a few $1,000 for the lease.
What are we expecting to hear on that number?
I have a question out to the fleet group.
Well, we do have a figure from Ford.
Yes, we do, but it's not accurate because the cost of the vehicles per Captain Smart is slightly different.
Oh, okay, so is he still working with Ford
Well,
then?
I'm waiting to hear back confirmation on the final calculations because I need to know with the changes what the full financed amount is so I can impute that, what we're paying in interest and have a full number. But for right now, it's 700,000.
Dan?
For the record, we have lowered the initial number based on our going back and reviewing it. We were at 24-1, and I think we're at 22-1 now. So that's probably going to help some. But the other part that's a little confusing about where we're at with the vehicles and it kind of inhibits the ability to make a good decision about it is we don't know how many vehicles beyond those patrol cars. I mean, there was one conversation, there's gonna be a jail van in there, and then we were talking about leasing, and then they said, I think we said, let's put both the jail vans back in there. And then we were talking about picking up some other vehicles as part of that lease. And so it gets a little bit confusing because really where we started with this was with the patrol cars and a jail van, a single jail van. And I think we threw in a search and rescue vehicle in there, didn't we?
No, you threw in a detective.
A truck. And so, again, we want to keep everything we ask for, but the bottom line is we're willing to work with the board, and this is an area that the sheriff and I did talk about, and we will be willing to work with you on that if that's a sticking point.
Okay, so we're still 562,000 short.
I'm ready to talk jail overtime.
Go ahead.
So help me understand, if we are now almost fully up to staff, fully trained and everything, why still such high numbers?
I will defer to the specialist right
Is
there.
that 309, is that sit right now, is that an increase to our 225 or is that total?
I think that's an increase.
It's the estimated loaded increase, I believe it's 210 or 220 is the base amount.
What I did, and I spoke to this, is I took the average. You're right, we're getting close right now, and I knock on wood, I certainly hope we end up there. It's one of those numbers that all I can do is predict and base it on past performance.
Right.
I hope it's less, absolutely, but it's gonna be based partially on transport, it's gonna be based partially on how our staffing maintains. People going to the hospital, there's certain things I can't control, so all I'm trying to do is accurately forecast it. If we lower it, great, that's something to push up against and hope we can stay below, but there's a chance we could go over.
What's fiscal 19? What were you budgeted for fiscal 19?
250 is a 215.
215.
215 is what we've been getting every year for the last forever. We always ask for more and then it consistently gets dropped to that. And salvage generally has covered it in the past and that's always been right.
And your jail population has been relatively steady of late.
It's right around about 390, 400 right now.
Yes.
So rather than go up to the 320, maybe 212 is a little bit low. What if we go 250?
We are at 250.
I'm sorry?
250 is what we're at, the loaded is 309.
Right.
Oh,
So
the
we're at
loaded is-
250,
Yes.
we're at 250 for overtime, but with the loading, it's 309.
And what was it last year? Fiscal 19? Or is that is fiscal 19?
215 unloaded, I believe.
Yeah. 215 plus this additional 250. So 215 is what you were at for this year.
215, yeah.
This is an increase ask of another 250.
Another 250,000?
Yes.
Yeah.
No. That's easy, no. There's no rationale for that.
So, let me come back to John, and I want to make sure this is clear with everybody. That number up there, Dina, are you saying that's an increase over the fiscal 19 numbers?
Yes.
But that reflects our average overtime spent.
Right.
And we get clipped. What happens is we ask, and we have projected every year what we think we're going to spend based on averages. And every year it gets cut back to that same amount. If I'm remembering this, am I remembering good? Okay. So.
And to John's point, then you're dipping into salvage.
We are, and you know.
I don't mind an increase, but a near doubling, I think, is a bit hefty.
That's what we've been spending, and that's why, I guess that's where the number.
Is that where you're coming from?
Yeah, like
Yes.
I said, I'm just trying to give you an accurate portrayal of what we've spent.
But to my point, they're almost fully up to staff, so it should really decrease.
It very well could.
And to your point, Leslie, and this has to be said, the reason it was as high as it was coming into this new opening of the jail, 'cause we were training a whole bunch of
Absolutely.
15 new hires,
Yep.
and so, you know, and And boss, I'll say this, and if you agree, great, and if you don't, then I'm in trouble. But you know, the bottom line is, I think we could probably cut that down a little bit. I don't know how much, but we would have to understand that if we're willing to cut down on it, if it goes up beyond our ability to control, that you understand it and put it back.
The reality is the trend usually is, even with the 215, if we have overtime, it's because we're short on people, and the salary salvage has cut it, so our aid budget as a trend is always balanced.
Right.
Or
But
we're-
I would think that since everybody's trained, if there is overtime, salary salvage would cut it, because why is there overtime unless you're down bodies?
Well,
So-
there's other reasons for overtime. I mean, I think we just had 2 inmates in the hospital. We put guards on 3 inmates in the hospital. We put a guard on each inmate. That's on overtime because I can't pull the guys off the floor. And so, I mean, there's other reasons for overtime. When we get an emergency order from the court to transport somebody to Orfino or Blackfoot, you know, that's way above and beyond our normal transport duties, and we have to do that. And we do one of those, well, about one a week. So, I mean, those are reasons that we have overtime in the jail. And I also know that, you know, John doesn't like to hear this, but I know there's 4 guys in the jail that are putting in for patrol in this next year, because they've already said it. So he's gonna be back to training and having open spots. And so, I mean, there is a reason. I agree with Dan. I think we can cut that, we can reduce that. You know, and if we have those open positions, yeah, we'll have some salary salvage there. And I mean, I guess, and I'm gonna go out on
Well,
one,
and-
and John's gonna hate me, but I'd say instead of 250, let's go for 1 1/4.
There you go, I'm fine.
And
You okay
we can
with
compromise there if that works. And
Yep.
Okay.
But please let the record reflect
The record always reflects.
that if it goes all to hell and we have to come back, then we're doing our best to contain it. Fair enough.
Your records are as long as the Dead Sea Scrolls.
You know, and Commissioners, that goes back to, you know, like I said, when we started this whole budget process, this is an estimate.
Yes.
And, you know, we don't know if we're gonna have 600 inmates next year and have to be housing out of county and doing transports and all that stuff too.
And that's
So-
an unforeseen.
And it's unforeseen, and we just can't control that.
Okay, so why don't we do this? Let's take a 10-minute break, and then we'll resume, and hopefully we maybe won't need more than another 30 minutes or so.
All right.
Thank you.
Somebody throw my wheelchair.
I gotta definitely get that for you.
How are you? Lost some people.
That's all right. Just waiting on Nancy to turn on the recorder.
Those weren't the people we lost.
We're there.
All right.
Okay, so the time is now 10:31. We're resuming our budget deliberations for fiscal '20. Dina, do you want to pick up where we left off?
Absolutely. Okay. So where we're sitting right now, after the sheriff generously cut some overtime, we are under $500,000. Congratulations. You guys have made some amazing progress today. I'm very impressed.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah.
everybody.
So, we need one big more cut, one big one maybe, and we're pretty much there.
Question, where are we with regard to the fair?
Fair is at
Where did we leave-
80,000.
Oh, okay.
So if you were to cut them to prior year, it's only 5,000. It's pretty immaterial.
Okay.
No.
Any other thoughts? Okay, I'm gonna throw something out here. Where's Ben?
Right here.
On the medical,
On the medical.
inmate medical.
Yes.
Let me point, and this is almost philosophical, but I'm gonna throw it out there. For as much as it costs us, which is, what's
It's a lot.
About 1.9 million.
Yeah, it's close to
Roughly.
2 million.
What would happen, and I don't know what the level of care is, so, bear
Pretty
with me.
basic. but, yeah.
Okay, if we hired nurses, 2 nurses, a physical therapist, I don't know what that staff is comprised of, and we're playing with a loaded cost of, I don't know, 400, 500,000, would that work?
No.
No.
We need 24-hour medical care, and so you'd have to have, multiple nurses on. We used to have nurses, we couldn't hire them because we couldn't compete with the hospitals. When they go to Kootenai Health and make 55, 60 bucks an hour, we couldn't compete with that. And working in a jail with healthcare is a pretty unique crew, and I'll tell you what, we've got a great crew that does a great job for us. We don't do physical therapy in-house. We have a couple of RNs, 2 RNs, 3 RNs, and the rest are LPNs and some EMTs, so they keep their costs as low as possible. The one thing that added cost to us a couple of years ago is we added a mental health professional. That's been critical for us.
Yeah.
And in today's society, I just came back last month from a meeting just about mentally ill in our jails. And having that position in our medical staff is huge, and it's really the trend of the future. So we're trying to deal with those people on the front end, and our medical staff, and I can't give them enough credit, they work a lot with Heritage Health. So when people get out of jail, they get that continuity of care, and they can pass them off to Heritage Health. So hopefully we'll reduce their recidivism, because we really don't want them back. And so we have plenty of new customers we need.
Just for what it's worth, about, I don't have a number in front of me, but about 350 to 400,000 of that is just anticipated expenses for hospital. Because sometimes it can't be taken care of in-house, and those are hospital bills that come in.
You have to transfer.
Just have to be paid.
Well, if you go to the hospital, I mean, like you said, the other day we had 3 people in the hospital. And if they have surgeries or things like that, we end up picking up the bill. And I don't like it any more than anybody else. Medicare expansion won't do that, Medicaid expansion won't do that, because they're not covered when they're incarcerated. And so, we wish they were, because that would take a big load off of us, but they're not. And until we change some federal laws, I don't see that happening this year.
Is that the same with the Veterans Administration?
Same with the Veterans Administration. They cannot receive veterans benefits while they're in custody. We've looked at that as well. Plus, the problem with veterans benefits is we have to take them to the Vets Hospital in Spokane.
I know.
And that's a whole nother nightmare of things. And then if they end up becoming an inpatient in Spokane, we don't have the authority to go guard them over there, because we're not Washington officers.
Do we get any discount from Kootenai Medical based on volume?
No. But I think we pay Medicaid rates.
We don't pay Medicaid
Okay.
rate because we're going through the third party.
Oh, that's right.
So if we were to take this in-house, we could pay Medicare rates for the hospital stays, but because we're going through a third party, we don't get those Medicare rates.
But it's just not possible to do it that way.
Okay.
We've been there and done that, and it just didn't work. good staffing.
Okay, fair enough. Anything by way of restricted funds or anything else where we have potential cuts?
Holiday buybacks.
What does that amount to?
123.
Might as well bring it up. Holiday buybacks? Here we go.
Well, you know, that gets a little complicated in the sense that you gotta pay for it anyway. I mean, if a guy works on his holiday, then he gets paid 8 hours extra that holiday. And it used to go, at one time, a long time ago, it used to just go in your paycheck, you know, and it would be taxed, but it would, you know, that 8 extra hours would go in your paycheck. Well, I mean, somewhere along the line, we let them, you know, start accruing that holiday time, and they held it. But it's time that you probably would have, I mean, most likely would have had to pay anyway. We can't comp them off because we're understaffed. We can't say, well, you got this 8 hours in this bank, so we'll try to get it off for you later on, because every time we try, we're down deputies. So, I mean, Ben, I don't know if you want to speak to it, but there is a component to that you have to pay.
Yeah, one way or the other, it's pay me now or pay me later, you know, type of thing. I think Dan summed it up pretty well.
You know, and again, I don't think.
We're not paying over, yeah, if we let somebody off and have to backfill the shift, then we have to pay time and a
Yeah,
half.
then you're gonna pay the overtime.
So,
And
you
there
know, that's
was
the
money
downside.
budgeted for this, and the part that I forgot to say is that we used to pay it out of salary salvage. I mean, that's how we were paying for it. All we're doing is budgeting for something that we didn't really budget for completely. Kim, you said we budgeted some money for it, but we didn't budget enough to cover for it.
Yeah.
So this is,
And I guess the one thing to say is that, you know, our guys work 12-hour shifts right now. They only get 8 hours of holiday, you know, under county policy. And so even though they're working 12, they're getting paid the 8 hours of policy on holiday. So we're getting a bang for our buck. They're only paying basically 2/3 of what they're actually working.
Nancy, you wanted to jump in?
I was gonna say that if we fund all of the open positions and we're funding overtime, we're pretty much double budgeting anyway. So they're going to have salary salvage, and there is money in position budgeting right now to cover some of the holiday buyback. So whether or not we need to fund more, I guess that's up to you, but they should have salary salvage.
I have one comment on that.
Go ahead,
Is
please.
the two positions that exist for holiday, I believe, are patrol and jail. We do have some holiday buyback being paid out in E911. So you could at least maybe establish a budget there,
No.
because that doesn't fund the tax.
No, we
Some
don't
of
pay out of
them-
E911 because it's dispatchers. You can't pay
there's-
dispatchers out of E911.
There are some administrators being paid in that
There's-
salary line.
There's only like 1 or 2 people in that salary line. I mean, that's a minimal.
I thought I counted 8.
No, there can't be 8. I can tell you that. There's not enough staff over there. You can't pay dispatchers out of the E911 line. It's law. So
I wasn't counting them. I'm counting the salaries that are in the
Colin
E911.
and Alan and 2 techs. Half of the sheriff. No, not the sheriffs. Half of the lieutenants. That's E911 dollars. I think there's only 3.
There was also a GIS staff member.
Vulture.
Oh, and half of the.
I was just
so,
looking
yeah.
for somewhere where you could increase it and it wouldn't be it
Wouldn't
wouldn't
be a
touch the
general fund
bottom
thing,
line.
yeah. And I think what Dan, you know, the important part for Dan is, we're just trying to be transparent in our budget. You know, we've been paying this money out, we're just showing you where it's going. So
Okay.
in the past, we've been,
it's not an extra ask.
this is just what it is. And if you want us to continue to take out, salary salvage, you know, we'll do that, but we're just trying to be transparent up front with it.
And you know, to Ben's point about the salary salvage, let the record reflect that we asked, and if we do, and if there wasn't enough salary salvage, then we can come back and say, hey, it didn't work, give us some more money, so I think that's fair.
Well, are there any open, I mean, we went through all your open positions that we could freeze to help offset that?
We're saying that based on
So-
what we discussed this morning, we're comfortable with freezing 2. Now, and again, I gotta be clear that if we get down the road and we look at this some more and we can find some other way to do it, we'll do it. But we discussed this pretty thoroughly this morning before we came here, knowing that this was gonna be discussed, and we felt comfortable saying too, that's 150 grand right there. So to answer your question, yes, that's about where we feel safe right now.
Okay, so then let's talk about the 30,000 in recruitment. I understand that's for laterals, is that right?
It's for
So-
relocation, it's some for laterals, and it includes now our dispatch
Okay,
for laterals.
so with the higher pay, is that gonna be as crucial?
If I had a crystal ball,
Well,
I mean, can we take something out of it?
what's crucial is getting the laterals in because they require less training, so we can get them out on the road sooner.
So that would be salary salvage?
You know, it possibly could be, depending on how much we have available. I mean, when you look at the jail side of it, when you have full positions, you have less salary salvage.
Right.
So if we're taking overtime out of that too, you know, it's gonna be a difficult call. On the
Holiday
patrol
buyback.
side and holiday buyback, we're adding
So
a
if
lot
We
of
haven't
salary
touched
salvage.
holiday buyback.
Well, and I think that the recruitment bonus program, you know, that a lot of that was relocation bonuses and things like that. We're not paying a higher rate for those laterals out of that line item. That's an A budget item, this is a B budget item. So, you know, when we budget for those, we were able to cover that, you know, if they come in at a higher rate because they're lateral. Now, we just weren't a lateral dispatcher this week, so, you know, came out of Long Beach. Happy to have it.
I don't think there should be an issue taking the 30 down to 20.
what's
Taking
that?
your 30 down to 20 on the recruitment.
So I'm being transparent, because her and I were just talking, and so Kim?
I think if we could give up 7,500 of that would probably be as low as I'd like to be able to go, with the idea that maybe if we did fill positions that, if we were lucky enough to get laterals in and pay those relocation bonuses, I'd like to be able to come back to the board and ask at that time if we needed that back, to be able to fill those positions with those bonuses somewhere down the line, as an individual ask, and, you know, as those things occur.
So one of those record will reflect things.
If it gets to that point, I mean, we're
Right.
about to exceed the amount and we need to recruit, I think we can take it up at that time. I don't think that's
Right.
gonna be necessarily, I mean, if we're talking about reload bonuses at $2,500,
Right.
that's certainly not gonna break the bank. So 7,500?
Yes.
Okay,
We got-
reduce by 7,500 or change to 7,500?
Reduce by.
Reduced by.
What's up there, what's the total of the remaining, that's a fair question, remaining capital that's up there? Capital,
All the yellows?
all the yellows?
All the yellows, 1 million.
There is an easy solution on the capital. You just throw it in fund balance. 400 grand, but if you don't want to do that, Nancy, you're shaking your head.
I would not recommend.
You would not recommend that, okay.
I think you already need to take a look at what you put into the fund balance group and make sure that you want to do that. That's a
Okay.
lot of money coming out of fund.
I think there's some calculations that need to be made before we can go much further. That's my sense. I mean, we can start cutting here and adding here and moving this to that. And the problem is there are some moving parts that need to be settled and moved. And whether it's this afternoon, we address those things if there's enough time, or it's Monday, but I think it's kind of, I don't want to say counterproductive, but people get nervous when you keep moving the target. And I'd like to know what the numbers are before I continue on.
Bill makes an excellent point. I don't think that the wage study is going to come in as high as we're budgeting.
Okay, so that might help us a bit.
It helped a lot.
And during our discussions for the wage study yesterday, the sheriff's office agreed to take a look at their B budget increases.
I want to speak to that.
He did
Yeah, but
agree.
don't speak.
I just have to
On the record, on the record.
And I promised her that we'd look at it, and I will not go back on my promise. But we have given up in this meeting $332,000. So I think we're pretty much doing our fair share of being cooperative.
Giving up or just of your new asks?
What we're doing is we're
Reduce our
cooperating
budget.
with the board, and we have clipped $332,000 towards making this work. Is
In
that
the
better?
discussion,
Yeah, but I'm getting ready to apply for patrol.
in the discussion yesterday, I brought up the $14,000 in new equipment the SWAT team has asked for, and the sergeant that was there said they could do without it.
How much?
$14,000.
14,000. It's just a lot of little numbers.
Come on.
It all adds up though.
It does add up, and I guess on its face, if the sergeant said it's okay, I don't want to give it up. I'll be straight up front with you, but if it makes this process go along, I look to my boss.
Well, I haven't talked to the sergeant about that.
He said it. She's
Okay.
telling the truth.
Do we have 2 for 14?
Even thing is voting on it.
Yes.
No.
No. No, please, no. So I think Commissioner Bill and Nancy both make a really good point. We've got a lot here. We need to run through the calculations. We can refine our numbers. We'll have the wage study numbers Monday, and we'll see what this number is. This number's getting fairly small. We'll also be working with the sheriff on those little bitties, numbers.
Chris, I need to speak
So-
one last time to that.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Because she's saying the right thing. Look, we're being asked to cut, and we're agreeing to work with you to make the pay work, to make other things work. But we have no idea how much, or what
No,
you
you're
want
right.
us to take.
That's,
So
that's what I'm saying.
we
gotta
could be
know.
giving stuff away that frankly, we
No,
don't
and-
have
and-
to. We don't want to give it away.
That's right.
That's right.
Or,
Maybe we need more.
yeah. yeah.
But we don't
Because
know. Bill,
in
that's-
fairness,
that's
we
the
need
key.
to have a dollar amount that we need
Maybe
to
enough.
Precisely, so,
Right.
and that's a very good point. You know, I was trying to see how far we could take it today, because we know that we still have to make cuts.
How do we
Now,
do
I'm sorry, go ahead.
How did we do?
No, we did fine, but the thing is,
One
if
more.
we wound up in a situation where we actually went positive, if that were to occur, then we could go back to the health premiums and basically restore what we had so that there's no increase in the premiums. But that's a whole, I don't know if that'll be achieved.
Let's see what happens.
But let's see what happens, that's a good point. A couple things I want to point out about the wage study before we go into public comment, which is what we've been doing. We had cases in the wage study, and I should point this out, because we tried to go with you know, the BDPA and the work that Sylvia did, along with Dorothy and Nancy's help. And we had cases in the wage study, and I want everybody to understand this, where the study came back and showed disparity as high as 40%, if you can imagine this. Well, when we looked at it and somebody's looking at a $30,000 to $35,000 increase, no, sorry, okay? So we had to basically set some guidelines, if you will, and there are some substantial increases because we do have some people that are grossly underpaid and that we have lost to other jurisdictions. And so we had to make some modifications there, so obviously no one is going to be looking at a 40% pay raise, all right? So I just wanted to point that out. We tried to keep to the study, but to Bill's earlier point, there had to be some tweaks because otherwise it would have just, you know,
It has to be put into the real
Right,
world.
Right context, okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you everybody very much. What's our drop dead date for us to have a number to you?
I believe it's next.
Thursday?
It's next Thursday, I believe, but I think we can get there Monday,
yeah.
Tuesday. I have agendas set for Monday and Tuesday. With the work that you've done today, we may not even meet Tuesday.
Okay.
So all fingers crossed, limbs crossed.
So I want to thank everybody, especially want to thank again Sylvia, she's gone, Dorothy, Nancy worked rigorously with her as well. Nancy, in case everybody was wondering, was running all the scenarios and setting up the equations and whatnot, so as we went through different scenarios, it could be calculated. Dina and Michelle, I hope I didn't forget anyone. Kim chipped in as well, so thank you everyone. Public comment? None, 10:50, meeting adjourned, thanks.
Good job, sir.
I gotta go in there.